Okay, thank you very much. I want to thank Wade and Fire Marshal Fack for putting this together. Wade's put a lot of time into this and has a lot of other people, the other presenters, and working through some technical issues and so forth. So thank you for inviting me to be here. What I'm going to talk about this evening is kind of a local perspective on fire service grants. And we'll take just about 9 or 10 slides to talk about content and the process that you go through, and use some examples from our grant writing, our actual grants, of what your grant should look like, and some of the wording you should use and so forth. What we're going to talk about will apply to the AFG Fire Prevention and Safety Grants, the Assistance to Firefighter Grant Program, or the AFG program that's open now, and then the Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response, or the SAFER grant for personnel. So that's what we'll be talking about this evening. Real quick, this is just a quick overview of our agency as it may relate to some of you. Wayne Township Fire Department in Indianapolis, Indiana, our jurisdictional coverage area is about 36 square miles. We respond to about 15,500 calls for service a year, plus or minus a few. The next number is important. 132 personnel assigned to our NFPA 1710 compliance and suppression. And that number is very important, especially when applying for the SAFER grant. And then even for the other grants, when you're reporting what your personnel are. The SAFER grant especially is interested in how many personnel you have as it pertains to your 1710 compliance or your pursuit of 1710 compliance. So as you can see, we have about 160 total personnel, but only 132 of those are basically assigned to shift and are responding to fires and emergencies on a regular basis. Everybody else being administrative or support staff as well. And then we're an ISO Class 1 fire department. We achieved that in 2018. The next two items are a quick summary of the grants that we've received through our last two grant applications. Our Staffing for Adequate Fire Emergency Response fiscal year 2018, awarded in 2019 for a little over $2.5 million over the course of the grant for 15 personnel. That's what increased our 1710 compliance number to 132 personnel. And then our Assistance to Firefighters Grant Program for fiscal year 2019 for a little over $500,000 that was awarded last year for the purchase of our new SCBAs. I'm going to reiterate what Kim talked about a little bit in her presentation here, and that is a couple of the grant requirements. So if you didn't catch it on her slides, take a picture of them here. The DUNS number, that's that 9-digit number, as Kim talked about, that's used as your business identifier. This is the number that the federal government uses to track how their federal money is allocated to agencies. And then again, as she said, if your organization does not have a DUNS number or nobody knows what it is, which is usually the issue, there's the website and there's the phone number to register or to search for that number. And then getting the DUNS number should only take a couple of days. Of course, everything's kind of up in flux now with COVID and so forth, with people working in office or not. So get ahead of that quickly and be sure that you have that information. And then also, as she talked about your SAM.gov account, this is how you register to do business with the U.S. government. You can update or renew your registration or check your status. And then your employer identification number, which obviously your agency should have. And then the picture there just kind of shows where this stuff goes on the grant application. As you can see, that first page of information is very important. That is page 1 out of 30 pages of information for the AFG grant that we were awarded last year for our SCBAs. You can see where the DUNS number is, where your EIN goes, your organization's legal name. It's very important that that matches what is in your DUNS and your SAM.gov account. So if that's a different name or not worded the same, it may cause you some issues in kind of the review process. Your address, all of that stuff, very important again, that matches what is in your DUNS number site and in your SAM.gov account. The applicant name is the person doing the grant. That's my name there. And then the address being impacted by this grant is we used our headquarters location. Be sure that when you go back, I know there's a lot of organizations, fire departments. I was just talking to one the other day about their grant whose headquarters has changed since their last grant application process. You want to be sure all that information is up to date as of the day of the grant application. And so page 3 of the grant starts to talk about those really critical questions about what does your agency look like. At the top of there, you can see it says, does your organization protect critical infrastructure of the state? I think that it's very helpful if that answer is yes, and I think a lot of fire departments do indeed cover that. And I just made some examples and pictures on the left-hand side there of what infrastructure looks like. The Interstate 69 expansion project, any interstate highways, railroads, wastewater treatment plants, any of those types of things. And as you can see in our narrative there, which is the second arrow, kind of talks about what critical infrastructure that we either protect in our actual jurisdiction, or that we send routine automatic aid to within Marion County, and so forth. So you can talk about it. Our population is at the top there. We talk about our NIFRS data. We'll talk about NIFRS in just a minute. We talk about being an urban community, and then go into talking about our access to the airport, and then the numbers of takeoffs and landings that are there, our major interstates that run through our jurisdiction, our Amtrak passengers, our close proximity to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and then the DOD facilities that we have within Wayne Township here on the west side of Indianapolis. And then go into talking about any SARA Title III reporting facilities that you may have that house hazardous materials, any information that you can get together, any data that you can get together that makes the case for areas that you protect being critical or of a high hazard type category are very beneficial to you in this process. Talk about your school system. In Wayne Township, we have almost 17,000 children in the school system every day. We have the second largest high school in the state of Indiana. And then we go through and kind of go through a breakdown. Where you find this data at, you can find it online. Your county may have this data. Your city offices may have this data. Your Chamber of Commerce may have a lot of this data where you can make contact with them and be able to have this stuff in your grant. The next one, do you currently report to the NIFRS system? You will be required to report to NIFRS for the entire period of the grant. So if you're not making those reports to the state on an annual basis, you need to be doing that. And if some of those reports have been incomplete at the state level, or the state says, hey, we got some of your data, but we didn't get it all, go back and see if you can complete that data so that the state has that data on hand as well. So you will need to be, it's helpful that you're reporting through the NIFRS system to apply for the grant, and then throughout the process or the period of the grant, that SAFER grant especially that goes 3-4 years, whatever the fiscal period is for that grant cycle, you'll have to report your NIFRS data. And then your FDIN or FDID number is next there at the bottom. And that should be ready and available to you. So the next page wants you to describe a financial need and how consistent it is with the intent of the AFG grant. They want details about the organization's financial distress, summarizing any budget constraints, any unsuccessful attempts you've had to secure other funding. Maybe you've pursued local grants, maybe you've pursued additional tax revenue, and you've been unsuccessful in any of those things. So one of the things that we talked about, which not only affects us, but affects every agency, I believe, public safety agency in the state almost, is the tax caps, the constitutional tax caps in Indiana, and the effect they have on local agencies, local government agencies to draw tax revenue. So as you can see, we talked about the Wayne Township Fire Department is restricted in its ability to secure additional funding due to tax caps. They were introduced into the Indiana State Constitution. The caps restrict our annual property taxes, and we go through the outline there, 1% for the value of a home, 2% for rental property or farmland, and 3% for the assessed value of the commercial or industrial property. And then we talk about the specific effect in dollars and cents that it has on our operating budget. So the tax cap or the circuit breaker affected our budget negatively little over $6.8 million in 2018, and that was for the operating budget. And so then additionally, it resulted in a little over $260,000 reduction in our cumulative fund that we use for capital projects. And we talk about what the challenges are. And then we talk a little bit more about what our jurisdiction looks like. And this is where you continue to make your case for the need for the grant. We talk about the tax cap structures challenges us to do more with less and rely on an increase in assessed value to increase our operating budget. And then we talk about some of our assessed value challenges. Our mean home value in our jurisdiction is about $66,000. About 60% of those properties are rentals, are not owned by the resident. We do have a high number of vacant industrial and commercial properties and single family homes. And then to kind of make the case more, we talk about our fire investigations unit, the fact that they investigated 90 cases of arson over the course of the last year. And then all of these factors contributing to an escalating opiate abuse and overdose crisis in our community as well. And so, well, what does that have to do with getting SCBAs? Well, it outlines and paints a picture about the jurisdiction that you cover. This is a lot of the same language that we used in our successful SAFER grant application the year before. And so transferring a lot of that data from the SAFER grant application to the AFG grant made the AFG grant process a lot smoother and a lot quicker, to be very frank. So our objective is to protect all the residents. This kind of is a closing statement, workers and visitors of Wayne Township. The awarding of this AFG grant will help us do just that. Concurrently, this is an important thing to say, our expenditures match our revenue, which means we're not having surplus funds at the end of the year. But that is only dependent on the assessed value of property. And so we may talk about the assessed value and how the tax caps affect that in the top of the narrative. And now we close by talking about, if revenue goes down or your AV goes down, then obviously the tax revenue goes down as well. And so the financial instability of real estate market, commercial and residential, is uncertain, as are mid to long-term financial projections. And I think that that's true for a number of places in the state. In case of a demonstrated economic hardship, are you asking for a financial waiver? The answer to that question from us is no, for an economic hardship waiver. And so that comes into play, especially in the SAFER grant, that you are requesting a waiver in case economic hardship makes it so you cannot repay, or not repay, but you can't support your portion financially of the grant. And then, are you receiving federal funding from any other grant program? No. And then, for the same purpose, no, but we are receiving, we were receiving at time of application the SAFER grant, which we had been awarded the year before. So our answer to that question is yes. And then we outlined what that grant is at the bottom of the page there. If you're not requesting, are you requesting training funds? We did not request any training dollars for our SCBAs. We wanted to request all of the financial assistance for the purchase of the actual equipment. So if you're not requesting training funds for this application, will you obtain training for this equipment through other resources? The answer to that question needs to be yes, and of course you do need to follow up by doing that. Project description. This kind of brings everything together in the actual of why we want the grant, and then it goes into cost benefit and so forth. So we talk about the fact that we did an informal needs assessment, a thorough informal needs assessment, and that based on that, we are respectfully requesting the AFG's assistance to purchase 7, good language here, NFPA 1801 compliant thermal imaging cameras. And then we go on, and so that was just one part of the grant, was the thermal imaging cameras, and then we go into the SCBAs later on. And we talk about our current stock, which you will need to outline later on in the grant as far as filling in what your current inventory is, the inventory that you have on hand that you're going to want to replace. So you need to have all of those numbers. If you're doing SCBAs, how many packs, how many spare bottles, and so forth, and what their ages are. We will use it to replace cameras that are older than 10 years old that we believe have failing or failed technology in them, or cameras that have already failed or don't meet the current standard under 1801 and NFPA.
And we talk about the cost down there at the second blue arrow. The total cost of each thermal imaging camera is roughly $7,900. The grant, we requested money for 7 of them for the total, and then the breakdown of what that kind of looks like. And then if you go to the next one on the right under cost benefit, you can see that where we kind of break down what it means cost-wise. And if you go to the bottom where it says the cost of this project is $55,300 over 10 years, we believe we'll use these cameras a conservative number of about 3,000 times, making their use about $18 per use. This seems a very reasonable expense to increase your likelihood of finding the fire victims or downed firefighters and minimize property damage to the owners. And then we get a little bit more specific and talk about for each of our citizens, this is less than 39 cents in 1 year or approximately 4 cents a year spread over the course of 10 years, which we believe is reasonable. And then we kind of close that out with the statement of effect and then the closing kind of statement. We believe that the benefit for the Wayne Township Fire Department will be tremendous. Having consistent, reliable equipment that is in good condition improves our ability to serve the community and reduce property damage. Talking about numbers of fires, reiterating the fact that the cameras that we have, the majority of them are over 10 years old at this point, unable to be repaired, not NFPA compliant, and so forth. And when we talked about in the other portions of the narrative that's not, I don't have put up here just based on time, we use the same language when we talk about the SCBAs. So this AFG grant was for thermal imaging cameras, for pack tracker devices, and for new SCBAs and bottles and masks. And then we talk about repair costs. At the bottom of the first page there on this slide, we talk about new cameras over the last 5 years cost about $15,000 to repair. Many do not get repaired and have remained out of service basically on the shelf. And then in the closing statement, we talk about how we can say that we are running with failing equipment and that much of it we don't believe has a much long of a useful life. And then when that equipment does fail, it's not repairable, obviously, to meet the current standards. So a lot of talk about the NFPA standard. We use a lot of that same language when we talk about the SCBAs and how our SCBAs were under the previous NFPA standard and not the current one. So one of the big aspects, so that just talks about some of the content that is in there. Again, we'll take questions at the end. My contact information will be on the next slide, so you're welcome to email me. We can communicate back and forth with a lot more specifics. But this is this is a very important aspect of the grant process when it comes to applying for federal grants, and that's your legislative notification and follow-up. We made contact with our Congressman, Andre Carson's office. We made contact with our United States Senator's office and asked them for a letter of support. Congressman Carson's office has somebody in their office that handles this kind of grant correspondence or this type of correspondence. And so we reached out to them. They were happy to provide a letter of support and to do some follow-up on our behalf when it came to the awarding process. And so that's very, very important. So make contact with your elected officials, your federal elected officials. If you don't know who those people are, the website there at the bottom, if you just go to govtrack.us, and then you can put in what you're looking for, basically your federal elected officials, and that'll take you to this /Congress/member/IN #representatives page. Put in your zip code. Obviously, keep in mind, put in the zip code of your agency, not where you happen to live, because they'll be different probably, where your agency is located, and that will tell you who you need to correspond with. I can't stress enough how important that follow-up is with your federal elected officials. This is my contact information. Please feel free to reach out to me. When word gets around that you've had a successful grant process, people tend to hear about that and they reach out, just do some networking, and we've communicated with a lot of other fire departments in the state about their grant process. And frankly, that's one of the things that helped us be successful in our grant process, is reaching out to other agencies that had had some success in their applying for their grants. And so it wasn't certainly wasn't just a me effort, and certainly wasn't just our agency effort. It was an effort of a lot of people to get involved. So that's just kind of a quick run through in 20 minutes of what the grant process kind of looks like, what you should expect it to look like. And also, if you email me, I'm glad to send this PowerPoint to anybody that would want it so they can take a little more time with it as well. And thank you very much.